egalitarian really is, saying that it has nothing to do with equality of outcomes and it's just about equal rights and equal opportunity and blah, 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 blah. Now, I made a video a while back about how basically the left changes the language. This is why feminists call everything rape. If you fart on a woman, it's rape. If you man spreading is rape, stare rape. It's so fucking retarded. But they do this for a very good reason. They do this because words have power. It doesn't matter if they don't mean what they think they mean. Using the word has power. And over time, the dictionary reflects the predominant view of the majority. So if they just keep repeating their bullshit definition enough, it becomes the definition. I mean, you could look up the word literally. Because people misuse the word literally so much, it now means the opposite of what it's supposed to mean. Now, I made a mistake that I, in a previous video, said I wouldn't make. I didn't define my terms, and that was on me, and I deeply apologize. Let me define my terms now, and hopefully this will clear up a lot of the confusion in my debunking egalitarianism video. Okay, first up, I believe in equality before the law and equal opportunity. Now, equal opportunity is really unattainable because we're not born with the same opportunities. If you're born with a disability, if you're a woman, if you're socioeconomically disadvantaged, you're not going to have the same opportunities as someone else. So the only way to create equal opportunity across everyone is to disadvantage people, which is contrary to the concept of equal opportunity because you're handicapping certain people and elevating others, which actually feeds into equality of outcomes. I know this is going to get kind of confusing, and I do apologize. I think everybody understands that equality of outcomes is bad. When the government or any group tries to equalize outcomes, they must play to the lowest common denominator. They must lower everyone to the status of the lowest person, making everyone equally miserable in order to establish equality. There's really no other way. And you see this with feminism, where they have basically given up the idea that men and women are biologically equal, because given an equal playing field, men will always win. So now, in order to establish equality of outcomes, they must discriminate against men overtly. They can no longer just eliminate barriers of discrimination, they must actively discriminate against men and promote women. You see this in things like affirmative action and hiring quotas. They're talking about actually paying men less for the same work in order to eliminate the pay gap, because women work less than men and they earn less than men as a result. In order to eliminate the pay gap, we should just pay men less for the same work. Now, that doesn't make sense. For someone who believes in equality before the law and equal opportunity, that makes no sense. That's overtly discriminatory. But for someone who's trying to achieve equality of outcomes, that makes perfect sense. So I think we're all on the same page when it comes to equality of outcomes. Now, you have to be aware of one of the ways they disguise equality of outcomes. And this is when they use the phrase political, social, and economic equality. And if you look at the definitions of egalitarianism, depending on the dictionary, again, words change their meaning all the time, but depending on the dictionary, it does include these words. For example, dictionary.com defines egalitarian as asserting, resulting from, or characterized by belief in the equality of all people, especially in political, economic, or social life. There you go. So dictionary.com, equality of outcomes. Now, Merriam-Webster defines egalitarianism as a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic affairs. There you go. So we have Merriam-Webster and we have dictionary.com overtly showing that egalitarianism equals equality of outcomes. However, if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, it defines egalitarianism as the doctrine that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. No mention of equality of outcomes, no mention of social, political, and economic equality. However, equal rights is the important thing. Now, again, this is another example of a word being hijacked by the left. And I know I sound like Bernard Chapin talking about the left, and I really don't mean to, because I really don't want to talk about politics, but this is a very leftist thing to do. I mentioned in the comment section, and I think I added a note to the description of the video, the concept of negative and positive rights. Now, if you've never heard of negative and positive rights, it's because this used to be known as rights and privileges. However, rights became known as negative rights and privileges became known as positive rights. And here's why that happened. People started calling things that were privileges rights. And again, just like I said earlier, when people start saying things incorrectly long enough, the dictionary reflects what people say rather than what the word truly means. I'll give you some examples. The right to life, liberty, and property, are negative rights. A negative right means nobody can take it away from you. You're born with it, it's inherent to you. Nobody has to provide it. So nobody provides your right to life. You have your right to life simply by being alive and being a human being in a society that respects rights. Now, obviously, rights don't objectively exist, but I'm just talking about within a society that holds these rights to be ideals and defends them, nobody grants you your right to life. So again, negative rights are rights that nobody takes away from you. So life, liberty, property, things like that. The only way that these rights are taken away from you is if you violate the rights of someone else. So if you kill someone, the government or whoever, a lynch mob, they can kill you right back. If you steal from someone, they can confiscate your property, that sort of thing. So those are negative rights. Those are what used to be known as just rights. Now, privileges are now known as positive rights. These are rights that someone must provide to you. So the right to health care, the right to food, the right to shelter and clothing, and most importantly, the right to vote. If you think of voting rights, these are not negative rights. And this is obvious because you need to register to vote. There are certain rules and regulations required to vote. It's a very complicated process. It's not like your right to life. It's not like you have to apply for a life license from the state who grants you the right to life. You know, everyone just has the right to life given to them by lieu of them being alive. That's the difference between a negative right and a positive right. A positive right is something that has to be granted to you and has to be regulated by the government. And there's always some sort of rationing mechanism in a positive right. For example, with voting, men must register for the draft. Women don't have to. They're just, whatever. Double standards all around. But men must register for the draft or they can't vote. Another right, such as Social Security, when you're in your 60s and 70s, you have the right to collect Social Security if you worked for X number of years and you fall within this or you're disabled, whatever. There are certain prerequisites you have to meet in order to qualify for this, quote, positive right. And the reason why is these aren't rights at all, they're privileges. Voting is a privilege. Driving is a privilege. Collecting retirement money from the government is a privilege. This isn't a right. However, we've called them rights for so long, they're now known as rights. And this is why the left did this. This is why they changed the word from privilege to right. Because if you're for equal rights, you can't talk about restricting rights, these positive rights between people. For example, if you're talking about cutting off, let's say, welfare for people who do drugs or something, you're violating their rights. They have a right to this and that. If you're talking about taking away women's right to vote because they never should have been granted it in the first place because they're not subject to the draft, they didn't have to bleed and die on the battlefield, and even to this day, they only make up like less than 4% of the army, you're not for equal rights. So again, and this is the sad thing about words. When words become tainted by this co-opting of language, the only way you can really respond is to abandon the word. You can't take it back. It's not like you can take it back. I'm going to fight for this word. I'm going to keep using it. It's like Christina Hoff Sommers talks about taking back feminism, and no, it's too tainted. You got to let it go. So egalitarianism, because it is for equal rights, because it is for social, political, and economic equality, it is for equality of outcomes. And when you talk about equal rights, even if you don't mention social, political, and economic equality, when you're just talking about equal rights, due to the modern usage of the word rights, this includes positive rights like voting. I have no problem with equal rights in regards to negative rights, or what used to be called rights. Life, liberty, property, that sort of thing. Everyone should have that right for themselves, but not everyone should vote. Children don't vote, felons don't vote, men who don't register for the draft don't vote. So these rights aren't universal regardless. There's all these double standards. There's ways that the government can restrict these rights based on whatever criteria they set. So it's not universal. But this is used to disguise extending basically services and commodities and privileges to people who shouldn't have them. And obviously, I'm talking mainly about women voting. Women should never have been given the right to vote. But if you talk about that, it's like, oh, that's crazy talk. Oh, equal rights. It's not a right. It's a privilege they never earned. And that's why they never should have been granted it. And when they were given the opportunity to rectify that by passing the Equal Rights Amendment, women rejected it. Like, oh, I'm going to have to be subject to the draft and treated like a man? Oh, fuck that. I just want the privileges. Equal rights. And this is another thing. The concept of privilege has also changed definition. It's gone from something that somebody grants you to basically nature. If you're born in a certain circumstance, like you're a certain race or a certain gender, or you're born in a wealthy country, that's considered a privilege. Like, that's not a privilege, that's just fucking life. That's nature. Nature's not fair. So, nature's become privileges, privileges have become rights, and that's why you can't really be an egalitarian if you only believe in equality before the law and equal opportunity. You can't believe in equal rights anymore. If you believe in equal rights, you're for the equal distribution of services and privileges across people who never earn them. And if you do that, you actually are for equality of outcomes. It's become synonymous with social, political, and economic equality, which is equality of outcomes. It sucks that you have to abandon good words just because they're co-opted, but that's life. That's what happens. It sucks. You know, but there's really no taking it back. I think the best solution is to speak plainly and try to avoid titles and labels. Like, I can't say I support equal rights anymore because the definition of rights has changed. I now have to say I support equality before the law and equal opportunity. It's a few more syllables, but it clearly states what I believe in and what I don't believe in. I don't believe in equality of outcomes. I don't believe in social, political, and economic equality, and I don't believe in equal rights. And the reason why I don't believe in equal rights is because they now include so-called positive rights, which are actually privileges. And to demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'm going to use a very robust definition from a website called philosophybasics.com. And it defines egalitarianism as, quote, a political doctrine that holds that all people should be treated as equals from birth, usually meaning held equal under the law and society at large. Okay, so far so good. It is a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic rights and privileges. See what happened? We started out strong, equality before the law, awesome. And then all of a sudden, we veered into social, political, and economic equality. And that's where we went off the rails. And now we're talking about equality of outcomes. Anyway, it continues, quote, and advocates the removal of inequalities among people and of discrimination. Again, I'm for the elimination of discrimination, but the removal of inequalities requires equality of outcome, which is distribution and discrimination. You can't have freedom and equality. The only way to achieve equality is to discriminate and tear down people who are higher, and that's horseshit. The next paragraph continues, quote, political philosophies such as socialism, Marxism, communism, and anarchism all support the principles of egalitarianism to some degree. Some argue that modern representative democracy is a realization of political egalitarianism, while others believe that in reality most political power still resides in the hands of a ruling class, rather than equally in the hands of the people. For example, the United States Declaration of Independence of 1776 includes a kind of moral and legal egalitarianism in its assertion that all men are created equal, and therefore that each person should be treated equally under the law. But it was not until much later that the US socially extended those benefits to slaves, women, and other groups. The motto of the French Revolution of 1789, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, was only really institutionalized during the Third Republic at the end of the 19th century. So then it talks about types of egalitarianism, and I want to talk about each one of these. Economic egalitarianism, or material egalitarianism, is where the participants of society are of equal standing and have equal access to the economic resources in terms of economic power, wealth, and contribution. It is the founding principle of various forms of socialism. Need I say more? I probably shouldn't. Moral egalitarianism is the position that equality is central to justice, thus all individuals are entitled to equal respect and all human persons are equal in fundamental worth and moral status. Almost, but not quite. Again, fundamental worth is the important thing. The idea that everyone is of equal worth is a fundamentally religious concept. It has to do with the belief that all souls are equal in the sight of God. I mean, if human lives are all equal, why is abortion a thing? Why are we murdering babies in the millions? You could argue with me if you want. You could say this is some sort of ideal, but it's a religious ideal. I don't deal with religious ideals, I deal with reality. Legal egalitarianism, the principle under which each individual is subject to the same laws, with no individual or group or class having special legal privileges, and where the testimony of all persons is counted with the same weight. Okay, I can mostly agree with this. Mostly. The thing is, the same legal privileges, if that means things like voting, and extension of privileges to people who never earned them, then fuck that. Now, for the most part, I'm not opposed to legal egalitarianism, but right now we're only 1 for 3. Political egalitarianism is where the members of society are all of equal standing in terms of political power or influence. It is the founding principle of most forms of democracy. And another thing is, again, children don't vote, felons don't vote, men who don't register for the draft don't vote. So Political egalitarianism is already bullshit because the government puts all these little strings on who can vote, who has influence, who has power. They're always tweaking the rules. So this whole idea that everyone has equal standing is horseshit. I mean, women clearly enjoy more privileges and less responsibility than men in regards to politics. And if you're an egalitarian, you should be like, oh, that's horseshit. But, you know, nobody bats an eye, nobody makes a peep. All right, the next one is luck egalitarianism. Never even heard of this one before. Is a view about distributive justice. What is just or right with respect to the allocation of goods in society. Okay, so it's communism. Espoused by a variety of left-wing political philosophers, which seek to distinguish between outcomes that are the result of brute luck, misfortunes in genetic makeup, or being struck by a bolt of lightning, and those that are the consequence of conscious options, career choice, or fair gambles. This is clearly equality of outcomes. This whole luck egalitarianism, which I never even heard of. But you can see, like, this is leftism, almost all the way down. Almost all forms of egalitarianism are socialist or leftist, or some form of redistribution of some goods and services to people who didn't earn them in the name of equality. Hopefully you're starting to see a pattern here about why, if you are for individual rights, if you're for a free and just society, you should not be an egalitarian. Gender egalitarianism is a form of society in which power is equally shared between men and women, or a family structure where power is shared equally by both parents. Sharing the power, but not the responsibility, and that's the problem with feminism. Feminism is like, oh, we want to share power, but men, you can still be responsible. You know, women can share power with men when they share responsibility with men, which will never happen. Racial egalitarianism is the absence of racial segregation, the separation of different racial groups in daily life, whether mandated by law or through social norms. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, you know, as I've stated in several videos, I think racism is stupid. I think the concept of race is fairly arbitrary and is mostly a social construct. I'm not saying people don't have genetic differences, you know, hair, eye color, and so forth. But the fact that we define people as different races and create like a tribal system is complete bullshit. So, all right, next is opportunity egalitarianism. Is the idea that equality is possible by a redistribution of resources, usually in the form of a capital grant provided at the age of majority, an idea which has been around since Thomas Paine. So, again, equality of outcomes, redistribution of wealth, socialism, all that good stuff. Christian egalitarianism holds that all people are equal before God and in Christ, and specifically teaches gender equality in Christian church leadership and in marriage. Now, this is bullshit for two reasons. One, religious beliefs should not have a place in secular morality. And two, the Bible does not teach gender equality in church leadership or marriage. I've read the Bible. There's a pretty clear message about who should be in charge of the family and the church. If any Christian reads the Bible and gets to the conclusion that God wanted men and women to share equally in church authority and in the family, you're fucking retarded. But 2 out of 9. So if you're just going to judge egalitarianism as an overall concept, and you can only agree with 2 out of 9 forms of egalitarianism, you really shouldn't be calling yourself an egalitarian. If you're only for the equality before the law, you're only for the removal of arbitrary barriers in the form of equal opportunity, and that's all you're for. You favor a meritocracy. If you favor those things, you cannot call yourself an egalitarian. Not anymore. There may have been a time back in the day when you could say, I believe in equal rights, because there's a difference between rights and privileges. But now that difference between rights and privileges has been destroyed. So you really can't even say you're for equal rights anymore. Because if you say that, you're also favoring a bunch of privileges being extended to people who never earned them. So now I hope I've defined my terms. I hope I've clearly defined what I mean when I say egalitarian. And if you don't agree with these definitions, if you're just like, oh, well, you know, egalitarian just means equal opportunity. Okay, then you know what? Keep calling yourself an egalitarian. I'm not talking about your specific brand of egalitarian. I'm talking about the actual definition of the word. And maybe it didn't always mean that. And maybe you're just kind of thinking about what it used to mean back in the day, but this is what it means now. I mean, it's almost like feminism, because you see, you know, there's like feminists like Christina Hoff Sommers, who were probably very passionate supporters of first and second wave feminism, but don't agree with third wave feminism. feminism has been hijacked in their mind. Now, I think it's always been bullshit because even from first wave feminism, feminists have established double standards. They never should have been given the right to vote. Fuck that. Anyway, I keep coming back to that. But the same thing that happened to feminism, where it was tainted and hijacked, and now it means something completely different than what it may have meant back in the day. Same thing has happened to egalitarianism. Anyway, I hope this clears things up. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.